The question that always comes up around video game adaptations, and really has for my entire life, is when are we finally going to get a really, really great one? And the answer is now. The Last of Us is a rock-solid adaptation of the video game series from Sony, and it's fantastic overall. It's got some pretty noticeable flaws, which I will get into, but overall, it's great. Let's talk about it. Thank you so much for checking out the video. Before we get started, click on that red subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you know whenever I post a new piece of content. Based on HBO's history adapting, books and series, this was always going to work. It always was going to work. As soon as I found out HBO was teaming up with Naughty Dog and Sony to put this out, I knew it was going to be successful, and it definitely is. This is phenomenal storytelling, adapted from phenomenal storytelling. The Last of Us has probably one of the best stories in all of video games, and it's kind of ripe for something like this. I think turning it into a TV series instead of a movie is 100% the right call, and they did a fantastic job with it. This really starts with the casting of Joel and Ellie, and as you can tell from the title of this video, I have to spoil this, so I'm going to. Pedro Pascal is a great Joel. He has the right delivery, the right physicality. He's not like my vision of Joel, but he is a great version of Joel. So kudos to him for doing a great job with this material, and I think he's fantastic. I really do. Bella Ramsey is Ellie. This is one that was going to be a little bit tougher for me because Ashley Johnson's voice in particular, and probably her being really the main character in the second one too, she has a lot more like to work with, I think, if in terms of like, we know, I guess you spend more time as her because of her relationship in the second game, that I think there's just more to work with her. So it was going to be a hard sell getting Bella Ramsey to play this part for me, but she does a great job with it. She really does. Her performance, the emotional resonance that she has, her relationship with Joel is great, and really, they have a great chemistry that was necessary to make this show successful, and ultimately they do. You can tell that they work well together. They start off kind of butting heads and grow to, have this budding great friendship as the series develops. It's a little bit tougher here because of the length, right? You spend way more time with these characters in the games just because of the nature of the storytelling. But overall, this is great. They really hit their casting. I think I like that Ashley Johnson has a cameo role as Ellie's mother in the last episode of the show, and she's great. It's really weird hearing her, though, because that's Ellie, right? So her voice is so recognizable that it's a little strange having her in that episode because I'm like, man, that is just Ellie's voice. So it's a little bit distracting. But I really like that they put her in at the end. I like Troy Baker's, kind of like meaty cameo as James, who's the member of this cannibal cult, which is an episode I'll get into. And it's really cool to see him as well play a character that's sort of important to the story in that episode, actually really important to the story in that episode. It's like just the right amount of cameo, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I really like him in that too. My two favorite performances, though, despite all of those being really good, are Scott Shepard as David. This is just the right amount of weird and creepy, and dude, he nailed it. I really like that. He was phenomenal as the religious leader of this weird cult of cannibals. And then the other one, and one that I think deserves so much credit, is Merle Dandridge as Marlene. I love that they cast the actress who played her in the games as her in this series. I think she's the most true to... She's the one who feels the most like her character from the games. She's so freaking good in this, and I wish more people would talk about it because I think she is a home run and probably the best piece of casting. And it was so easy. Like, she's the voice. She has the look. She has the acting chops. I love the performance that Merle gives as Marlene. I think it's fantastic. it hits all the right story beats, and that's something that's extremely important when you're converting one medium to another. The most important moment in this entire series is Sarah's death at the beginning. It's what drives Joel to become this bittered, hardened survivor. And it's also what allows Ellie to bring out his previous life. You know, it gives him life. It breathes life back into him. And it ultimately ties into the very ending of the series when he has to lie to her. And when he saves her life, and when he does what a father should do, which is put the life of his child above everything else. He's doing the fatherly role because of what he lost in the beginning. So they really tie that well together. And that first sequence where Sarah dies in the beginning is really, really good here. They did a great job with it. It's an emotional gut punch in the game. And if you haven't seen the series, it's an emotional gut punch here as well. So they did a really good job with that. Henry and Sam, two really important, but, you know, smallish characters that have this great relationship that develops between the four of the characters, between Ellie, Joel, Henry, and Sam. And their deaths are really, really well done. And they hit that really well. The Cannibal Cult, what else is there to say about this entire episode? It's one of the best translations from game to series, despite some challenges with like having it play, like how it plays out to the viewer, to the gamer, and I'll talk a little bit about that later as well. The entire sequence at the college in Eastern Colorado is handled really, really well. I think in the game it was a little bit of a stretch to have your main character get impaled all the way through with rebar, and then after some shots of penicillin be fine. It's much better in the series. It just is. He gets stabbed, which is clearly something that's painful. It's a lot more realistic and a much easier sell to have him simply get stabbed in the side and then be able to get stitched up and recover than him get stabbed all the way through with a pole and end up being okay. It's just, it's much better doing it that way, and it was noticeable for me because I was like, the whole time I'm wondering, I'm like, okay, clearly he's going to get injured because they're going to do the stuff in the mountains with the cult. But what was it going to look like? And it's handled really well here. And then the ending, right? This is, it's the exact same cliffhanger ending that you got in the first game. And Joel makes his decision to save Ellie's life and ultimately take that decision away from her. But also it's not like they sit down and have a conversation with her about, you know, we're going to kill you when we do this. The Fireflies ultimately just like kidnap this girl and then are ready to sacrifice her in the name of the greater good. And I think Joel does, there's a lot of controversy about this, but I think Joel makes the decision that any father worth his salt would make. So that's my opinion on the subject. And I think it's all handled with just the right amount of emotional touch. So they did a great job with that too. And then some of the bad stuff, right? There's not a lot. Most of all, this is a fantastic series. I think the stuff with Bill and Frank is certainly has an identity politics agenda, and my issue with it is that it contributes absolutely nothing to Joel and Ellie's story. There's two important kind of side stories that are really important that they fit in here. One is the Left Behind DLC, which is important because that's developing Ellie's character, right? And then there's this story, which is a very small side quest. Well, it's a substantial side quest that doesn't have a huge impact on the story in the games and has even less of an impact here. In the games, or in the first game, Bill and Frank are a couple of survivalists. Frank kills himself and leaves a letter saying, Bill, I hate you, I despise you, and basically you suck. In the show, it's the complete opposite. They are two guys who find themselves in this nasty situation and then become, you know, lifelong partners. And it's just completely the opposite of what it is in the games. And you can tell HBO just wants to pander, and they do. And I think the story, two things can be true at the same time. One, it's really well acted, especially by Nick Offerman. It's probably the best performance he's done in anything. And it's emotionally gut-wrenching and tough to stomach because of how emotional and devastating it is. So that's one thing that's true. The other thing that's true is that it is emotionally manipulative, and it exists only to pander and pander. That's it. That's the only word I can think of. So those two things, it's just unnecessary. It offers nothing to the story of Ellie and Joel, which is all I really care about. One thing too that I really think sucks is that they had a chance to take a side story that's actually fairly fleshed out in the games and expand on it further, and that's Ish's story. Ish's story is referenced, for those of you who don't know, or just kind of glossed over this in the games. There is a period where you go through this kind of underground sewer colony that has, you know, it has like a food storage area, it has a nursery, a kid's room, a little school, and it's this underground colony of survivors that gets built and then destroyed because somebody leaves the door open. And it's super fleshed out in the game, and it's told through notes that Ish, who's this character, leaves for the player to then go back and read throughout the game. And it's fantastic, and it's something that you can kind of see through in your head as he's telling you the story, and it's effing awesome. And the whole time I'm like, man, I hope they do Ish's story. I hope they do Ish's story. And they don't. They have the shot in the kids' room in the nursery, and then you see Ish's name on the wall or on this letter, and that's basically it. And they're like, oh yeah, this must have really sucked. If you're gonna flesh out one of these side stories, that was the one. Because that actually impacts Ellie and Joel as they see kind of what the world has become. And that's an emotionally devastating story that I think they could have told. And I think it would have been way better than doing the Frank and Bill stuff, but I get it, it's 2023 and you have to have identity politics. So one other challenge, and this isn't as much of a criticism as it is a observation. In the games, everything is just way more fleshed out because you have the gameplay, you have each of these small sequences in the series are much more expanded in the video games, right? I think the most notable example for me is the fight in the restaurant between Ellie and David. In the game, it's, 20 minutes of you sneaking around and then fighting David, and the whole thing is on fire around you, and then it's over. It's 5 minutes in the show, and then it's done. And the Colorado sequence is the same, right? You have this long expanded sequence, and in the show, they just go up there and they find what they need about Salt Lake City, and then they dip out. So that's just a natural, and I think the big one at the end is also at the end when they're in Salt Lake City at the hospital. In the games, that is a way, way, way longer period of time between when Joel comes into the hospital and when he ultimately rescues Ellie, and all of that stuff is handled really, really well in the series. It's just very different because in your head you have one idea of how it's going to look, and in the series it plays out differently because of how time works and how the medium in which you're telling the story. So overall, I think The Last of Us is fantastic. It's the best video game adaptation of anything that we've gotten so far, and it's really, really, really special. The qualms that I have with it are very minor. None of this is major stuff. This is gut punch, emotional, resonant storytelling at its very best, and I think everyone should be really proud of how this has been done. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they do with a second season, because that is a very, very, very different season. It's a lot darker, and I can't wait. So thank you so much for checking out the video. If you liked it, found it helpful, consider subscribing. You can also like and share it. That tells the powers that be that's worth promoting. And hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you think of The Last of Us Season 1, and I'll see you next Wednesday at 9 a.m.